Are you looking for an experience that will grow your teenagers' faith, increase their leadership skills, and teach them the discernment to engage with the world all around them, all while taking them on the adventure of a lifetime? I mean, who isn't looking for that? If your teenager loves fun, adventure, and wants to grow in their faith and leadership this summer, then send them to Excel's Summer Leadership Camp. Excel's Summer Leadership Camp is a 12-day experience for passionate young leaders looking to discover God's truth, to discern wisely, and live wholeheartedly. Your teenager will embark on a transformative journey in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where they'll build lasting friendships in the context of community, embark on thrilling adventures like camping, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and they will receive expert training and certifications in categories like CPR and wilderness first aid. Each aspect of the camp is woven together to help them learn to discover truth, to discern wisely, and take godly action in the context of real-life situations. To learn more or begin an application, go to theexcelcamp.org. That's theexcelcamp.org. Hurry, because summer is just around the corner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm excited to bring you today's conversation with Dave and Debra, who are lifelong educators and share their years of experience with us about what it means to deal with our kids. In our conversation today, we talk about parenting in a social media generation. We talk about listening and dealing with anxiety and pressure that comes with kids. And we talk about how to parent in a way that engages in conversation. There's some phenomenal practical tips in this conversation. You're not going to want to miss it. And if you're enjoying as much as I am, all this kind of stuff around anxiety, it's been so good to kind of dive into this topic with all of you. I want to invite you to check out the sermons over at restorationcenterville.org. We've been preaching on it and talking about it all month long, the whole month of August. This conversation is so important and it impacts so many. So check that out, restorationcenterville.org. And as always, the best compliment that you can give us is to share this podcast with a friend, tell somebody about it, invite somebody into the conversation around anxiety. So without any further ado, here is my conversation with Dave and Debra. I got two special guests today, Dave and Debra. Hello, guys. How are you?
Hi, Tony.
Hey, Tony.
This is so exciting because this is my first time ever having more than one guest on. So if I mess it up, forgive me in advance. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about yourselves, where you guys work, what you do, your background, that sort of thing. Debra, let's start with you.
Okay, so I'm Debra. I am a school counselor in an area high school. I'm in a public high school, about 900 students. And this is I'm starting my 21st year in education, my 11th in my district.
That's crazy. And you've got a master's degree in...
Correct. Master's degree in school counseling. My undergrad degree is in English, so I taught first.
That's outstanding. And you're married to this guy.
I am.
It's true.
How many years you guys been married?
12. We just confirmed for sure that it is 12.
Yes, yeah. 12 for sure. Dave, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I am the director of campus ministry in a local Catholic high school. I have been there starting my 9th year there now. Worked in Catholic education for about 20 years now, both in secondary ed and also at the University of Dayton for a little while as well. So.
And you guys both grew up in the church. Even though, Debra, you're not working in the church currently, correct?
Correct.
So you guys both have a faith-based lens that you were raised under, but Dave, you're the only one that is actually in a faith-based community.
Right.
And what do you do at the local school, high school?
So I'm the director of campus ministry. So that means I'm in charge of running the retreat program, planning all the liturgies that happen throughout the school year, working with the service projects that the students do, and prayer life of the students, a little bit of pastoral counseling, all of those kinds of things.
In a lot of ways, it's a lot like a chaplain. Is that too far to say?
It is a lot like a chaplain. We have a part-time chaplain as well, who's an ordained priest.
Right.
But he's there part-time and takes care of doing sacraments and those kinds of things, and I'm there a lot of the rest of the time, doing a lot of the other stuff.
That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to talk about, the rest of the time. Because in my experience, when people are receiving the sacraments, they're not thinking about their anxiety or pressures of life.
Certainly.
Hopefully they're just in the moment enjoying God's grace and presence.
Right.
So, I mean, let's just jump right into it. When you guys think of anxiety in your students, and you guys each see tons of students every single day and in 20 some odd years of teaching and being in those roles, there's no doubt you see a lot. What's the first thing you think of when you think of anxiety, Debra?
Typically, so for my students, the very first thing that is anxiety producing for them is academics. I mean, they are stressed about not only performing academically, so whether for them that's getting, straight A's or just, passing, everything in between. It's also where's this academic career leading me? So whether it's pressure from the outside, maybe it's societal or parents or somebody else who thinks you're gonna, if it's a family of doctors, so of course this kid's gonna be a doctor, right? And maybe that kid really doesn't want to do that. He wants to be a circus clown. So how do you have that conversation?
Yeah, now, and you're in suburban environments.
Correct.
I mean, like
yes.
we're all kind of in suburban environments, so it's obviously different if it was urban. But when does that pressure begin to first manifest itself?
So I work with grades 9 through 12, and it is absolutely already present in grade 9.
So a 15-year-old's rolling into high school, 14-year-olds rolling into high school, already thinking about what they want to be when they grow up.
Absolutely.
And picking courses.
Correct. And
Right.
if they're not, people are asking them those questions. And that happens even in middle school as they're starting to schedule for high school. In middle school, we're talking about exposing them to STEM and languages and all these different things. And they're, in some cases, 11 or 12 years old in 6th and 7th grade. So it's, an 11-year-old or 12-year-old kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Literally, some of them want to be a circus clown. They really don't know, or they want to do, they about 40% of them want to be gamers. That's where their mindset is. They're not thinking not only emotionally and in a maturity sense, but in an actual brain development sense. They are not thinking that far ahead. They're not thinking that far into the future. When I was 12, if you asked me to picture myself 22, I was like a gray-haired old lady. Our kids do the same thing.
Sure.
They don't have that forethought. So to tell them, think about what you're going to do when you're my age. Oh my goodness, they can't.
Yeah,
do
will they
that.
still be alive? Will they still be alive at our age?
So it starts very young.
Interesting. Dave, what about you? When you encounter anxiety in the campus ministry role that you're in, or even just in the high school, what's it look like for you?
I see definitely see the academic side of it that Debra was talking about, but I also see I guess I would say it's like a struggle to find balance. So they're anxious about academics, but they're also anxious about the 3 or 4 sports teams that they play on, and what positions they're going to get and how that's going to work out, and so there's anxiety that comes from athletics.
So let me ask you this: do most of your students who have anxiety around sports play multiple sports?
I don't know. I most of my students play multiple sports. It's the reality of where I am.
Right.
That many of them play multiple sports.
Well, certainly in Centerville, it's encouraged, it's applauded,
Right.
it's
Right.
It's trumpeted.
Kids
multi-sport athlete.
Kids will talk about taking one of the seasons off, like, I'm not going to play a winter sport this year, and sort of feel like they have to apologize for that. Like, I need to not do something this winter, so I'm going to have to take the season off. That's something that's unusual, or they shouldn't be doing. So there's anxiety that comes from that. There's anxiety that comes from their personal and social lives. I deal with teenagers. Their social lives are,
A mess.
They're constantly changing from one minute to the next. And so they're anxious about that. And they're anxious about just all of that kind of together, about a generalized sense of identity. As teenagers, the number one task of adolescence is to develop this identity, and they're struggling to figure out what that's going to be. And that in and of itself is an anxious time.
Now,
with all these other pressures too.
Is your curious about your master's in theology or is it in education?
My master's is in education administration.
Got it.
My bachelor's is in religious studies.
Okay, because I'm really curious to see the kind of the tension between the faith-based and the non-faith-based school, which is why I love having you guys on for this conversation. So let me ask you this: whoever wants to answer first, how much do you think of the anxiety that our teenagers face today is parent-induced?
I think there is some that is parent-induced. I'm struggling with like how to put a number on that or a percentage on that. I don't know how I would say that. I do think that there certainly is some pressure that comes from parents, but there's also a great deal that is not parent, that comes from society, that comes from just the sort of culture,
well, the identity stuff that you were talking about, right?
And from the nature of adolescence. It's an anxious time anyway. So, yeah.
It stresses me out just talking about it.
Yeah.
What about you, Debra?
I think, so I do see a lot of, that's an interesting question because I would say that, I'm struggling to put that in number two. A portion of many of my students' stress comes from that parent relationship. But it's not always because the parent is pushing too hard or because, they have higher expectations than the student or, conversely, it's not necessarily because they have an absent parent. But it's that, like Dave was saying, the nature of teenagers is angsty. So that relationship with their parents is often that way because maybe the parent does have different expectations than the kid. Maybe they have exactly the same expectations, but this kid is feeling like, I need to, I'm growing up. I'm mature. I mean, we can all probably, at least whether we want to or not, remember being 15, 16, 17 years old. And the last people for me that I wanted to hang out with was my parents. That is something I have seen change generationally, I think. Like my students seem to be more comfortable spending Friday night playing games with their families. Like that, for me, 25 years ago was the last thing I was going to do,
So what's your hypothesis around that? I mean, why is that?
I think part of that is that as parents, we have become more protective of our kids. Like when I was in second grade, I was jumping on my bicycle, riding down, the somewhat busy road between my house and my girlfriend's house. And my mom said, peace out, be home by dinner. Like that was it.
Yeah, we had a lights on, the street lights. When the street lights came on is when we had to be home.
Yeah. And I think we have a second grader. And the idea of popping my second grader on her bike and sending her down the road, I know it's a good idea and I should do it, but it also makes me a little angsty. So I think that our kids, and especially our teenagers right now, I think there's always an ebb and flow in a parenting style by generation. But the teenagers I have now, I think parents of this generation tend to be a little more protective, tend to keep their kids closer to home, tend to have a shorter leash on them. I hate to use that word because it's a,
Yeah, but it's twofold though, right? Because it's absolutely true, but at the same time, our kids have more access to the world.
Absolutely, and I think that produces a very interesting dichotomy for our kids.
Man.
How do you? So you have access to all of this, but you haven't really been given a lot of freedom or opportunity to explore anything. So then, when this is opened up to you, what do you do with it? And as a parent, I mean, how do you? And I don't want this to sound negative towards parents because this is something we are parents, so we wrestle with this as well. Like, I can't watch what my kids do every single moment, but I know that if they don't have, say, a device, a screen, a phone, a Kindle, or whatever in front of them, and something happens, we're out in the world and something happens, we can sit right there and have a conversation about it.
Right.
But if I'm not watching over their shoulder and seeing what they're being exposed to, if they don't tell me, we can't ever have a conversation about that. So they're learning a lot of things without my guidance. So even though, mom sent us off on the bicycle and we did our thing, look, I came home every day and we talked, how was Aaron's house? What did you do? Did you have fun? Like, and we talked every day when we got home from school. And I feel like
There's a lot less talking.
there's a lot less talking. And that's not to put blame on a parent.
No,
and
I mean,
say,
there's no condemnation.
It's just,
how do we get into this dialogue?
it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like as a couple, we both work fairly similar hours. The kids are moderately busy, but our girls don't have a crazy schedule. But there are days that, like, at 9:30 at night, we've put them in bed and we look at each other and go, well, we haven't even really talked to each other today. Like, it's been so busy. It's been so, and I feel like some of that is that our lives are much more structured than they were, when I was growing up in the 80s. Like, they're much more structured.
Yeah. Dave, how have you seen angsty teenagers and angsty parents change in your years of education? Because how many years have you been doing this again?
About 20.
Yeah, you guys are both 2 decades in.
Right. Don't say it that
I
way.
know. It sounds horrible.
Why?
Oh. You guys should be retiring soon, right?
Right.
How have you seen angsty students and parents change? And maybe the follow-up question to that is, how has your angst changed?
I think that I agree with Debra. I think that I have seen it change for sure over time, and I think that I agree with a lot of what she said about the reasons for that. But I think the other thing is there's the influence of, like, the social media and stuff that kids have, the access to social media, allows for that to happen in a way. So like, when I was a kid, like, I wanted to get out of my parents' house because I wanted to get out and see the world. Like, I wanted to, like, go have experiences that were not connected directly with my family. And I think that's for a long time.
And now you don't have to leave the house to see the world.
Exactly. For a long time, that was the essential, like, one of the essential things you did as an adolescent. You left. You had to get out. Kids are a lot more attached to their parents now, I think, because they don't have to leave to see the world. The world is, comes to them through their smartphone. But the version of the world that comes through their smartphone isn't reality.
Well, tell me more about that, because I think there are a lot of parents listening right now who haven't thought about it in this way. What does it mean when you say their version of the version of the world?
Because what you're so my kids get anxious because they feel left out, for example, of a social group. So their friends are all going out and they have to stay home for whatever reason. So when that happened to me when I was a kid, the friends went out and I stayed home, and maybe I was angry about it, and then that was it. But when it happens to my kids now, their friends go out and then they sit at home and literally watch them go out. They get Instagram messages and posts and Snapchats about minute by minute what's going on, and they are reminded on a minute by minute basis of what they're missing out on, of what's not.
Oh, it sounds like pure hell.
So right. So I mean, that I'm talking about anxiety. Like, like that creates this huge anxiety, but what they see on Instagram isn't, of course, what's really happening out there. What they see on Instagram is what whoever is posting that wants them to see, and so we see this sort of distorted view of what's really happening. You don't see reality. You see what someone else is trying to make look good. It's what someone else deems worthy of posting on their social media, and then
because people pose for the gram all the time.
Right.
Right.
And I'm not putting when I'm cleaning toilets. I'm putting when I'm,
Sure.
out with my friends doing something fun. Like, no one wants to know when I'm doing the nitty gritty work of being a mom or a homeowner or whatever. People want to know when I'm on vacation.
Yeah. And so I think you have anxiety because kids feel as though they're missing out, and they're getting a distorted idea of what they're missing out on. Like, everything else in the world must be better than my life because look, I see it right on my phone every day. But that's not really real.
Okay, so 2 esteemed, highly educated, experienced educators. What do we do?
Oh, if I could answer that question.
Well, one of the things I do is I provide as many opportunities as I can for kids to talk to each other face to face, which sounds really
Now, do you feel like that's a lost skill?
Yes. Yeah, I do. And in fact, I I almost say I have like tangible evidence that that's a lost skill. Like,
Okay, all right.
You know, like kids will like sit down to like have a conversation and they literally don't know how to do it. That, you know, like, well, you have to like look people in the eye. You have to like, you know, just basic skills like that are lost.
I had a coworker today. This was just before I came here this afternoon. I had a coworker today who was on the phone with her own middle school child, and said, "You have to learn to talk to your coach. I'm not going to do that for you. You have to." And this is, I'm hearing mom's end of the conversation. I have no idea what the other end of the conversation was, but I'm not going to do that for you. You can have the conversation, and then I'll follow up if I need to. But you need to learn to talk to your coach. And then there's silence for 15, 20 seconds. No, if you're not going to talk to the coach, then it's not going to happen. And so I'm hearing only, the one side of the conversation, but that's this mom trying to engage her own middle school child to have a face-to-face conversation. Again, 25, 30 years ago when I was in middle and high school, if I wasn't going to have a face-to-face conversation with my coach, my teacher, my parent, whoever it was that I needed support or communication with, it wasn't going to happen. I mean, I guess I could write them a letter, but besides that, there was no other way to communicate.
Write them a letter on your word processor.
Correct, or by hand. Yes. So I couldn't, there was no, I'm uncomfortable having a face-to-face conversation, so I'll run home and send him an email. Sometimes an email's great. If it's 10 o'clock at night and you've thought of something or you're working on homework, send an email, because then I don't have to respond to it till the morning. There's absolute value in the way we communicate electronically. But when we rely on it completely, that's when we lose our skill to sit and look at each other and have a conversation. And I think, even sometimes our social groups at school. I mean, I have lots of kids who go home and they have great friends, people that they know everything about. And I have students who have literally never met that person. Like, they've never looked them in the eye, but they game, or they communicate they've met somehow on the internet, whether it's through gaming, whether it's through social media, whether it's through, whatever. And they have these lengthy conversations, but they've never looked each other in the eye. And that, I think, is something that I worry about as we move forward. And as social media becomes a larger part of our lives, how do we remain connected to each other on that level of that physical level of eye contact, of and that elicits emotional connection with someone. Like, it's very easy to get angry with someone that's on a screen because there's no emotion involved.
Oh, there's no accountability for the emotion either.
Right.
Now, you can say ridiculous things and no one can look at you in the eye and say, that's ridiculous.
Right. And, or, when we were young, if someone said something really terrible to me, or if I said something really terrible to someone else,
I don't believe that could ever happen.
You should. You can see the disappointment, or the anger or the shock on their face. And that's when, like, to me, that's like the check, like, whoa, I crossed a line I shouldn't have crossed.
I just hurt someone.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that doesn't happen when you can't see a response.
And I think the flip side of that is also true. Like, when you speak to someone face to face, you can talk about something and share a story that you can't share on social media or in an email. You can convey emotion, and you can feel like you've been heard. And so it's not only is the negative thing true, the positive side of that is true too. Like, for conversations face to face, you can experience empathy. You can experience a sense of compassion from other people that that just isn't as tangible when you're not face to face. So, and when I see, like, when I do kids going on retreats, we'll go and spend some time with one another, and we'll have a chance to, like, sit and talk face to face about something that's going on in their lives, and they feel like they've been heard, and all of a sudden they're less anxious about it because someone listened to them. Mm-hmm. For real listened, like, and responded and said, "Oh, I hear you, I understand." That little thing makes a huge, huge difference.
So you use retreats as one of the ways to make that tangible practice. And for those of you that don't know what a retreat is, it's intentional time away to focus on relationship with each other and relationship with God, right?
Right.
Do you take cell phones from kids when you're doing that?
We don't take them.
Ooh, that sounds like a legal disclaimer.
We strongly encourage that they not have them or they not bring them at all. When they do bring them, we encourage them to leave them behind in their rooms for the day.
Can you punish a student?
I can. And I go back and forth about whether that's beneficial or not, because I also don't want a student to be on retreat and there's going to be angry at me and then shut down because he can't have his phone, and then he's not going to have any experience of growing from the retreat because he's just shut down and angry about this.
Do kids go into any sort of withdrawals without cell phones?
No. In fact, the kids who go, so we do a 4-day retreat program. They leave on a Tuesday afternoon and come back on a Friday afternoon. And they, over that time, we encourage them not to use their phones or to use them as little as possible. And almost to an individual, the students say they are amazed at how great that was. That they didn't realize how stressful it was to constantly be checking in all the time, and how great it was to unplug and to have a conversation with people that wasn't through a device.
Now, Deborah, in the public sector, you obviously can't do retreats.
Correct.
For the purpose of connecting with God.
Right.
How do you facilitate, or how does your office facilitate intentional conversation in person?
So that's a good question. So the reality is it's similar. It's just without God as the focus.
Mm-hmm.
So we do, and they start in middle school, and many districts do them, and they call them something different. Sometimes it's challenge day, or we do challenge day. But they do sometimes character day. It's got a different kind of name, but it's
right.
basically an opportunity for kids to step outside of the normal school day. So, they're in the gym or sometimes off-site entirely, depending on what, the school's facilities are like. We remain on site. We just use the gym. And gives them an opportunity to break up into groups. They have topics of conversation. They have speakers. It's an opportunity to connect with each other. So it's very similar to a retreat experience. I mean, I spent my first 8 years in private education, so at another local Catholic high school. So doing retreats there and doing challenge day with my own students now is incredibly similar. The difference is obviously the specific references to prayer, to God, those don't happen. Now, in individual group conversations, there may be a group of students who all of them find themselves, particularly faith-filled for some reason, or they share their faith experiences as a part of who they are. And then we don't, I think that can sometimes be a misconception about public education, is that we cannot talk about religion and we cannot talk about God and we cannot do that. And that's not necessarily true. What we can't do is force anyone to do that. So if a kid comes into my office and talks to me about something that's happened to them that they're nervous and upset about, and they're a particularly faith-filled kid, or God plays an important role in their life, then they'll talk to me about that. And I can have an open conversation with them about that. I just can't say to them, oh, you should pray about that because that'll help you. I can't give them that kind of advice. But now if a kid comes in and I know who they are and I know we've had these conversations before, I might ask them, do you pray about that? I know I know they pray in the past or something. So sometimes it will come up, but it's not something that we can facilitate or provide for them. But beyond that, in the group experiences, the students have very similar opportunities and very similar experiences. Some other things we do outside of just one day opportunities like that is we have a lot of different clubs and social groups, and we have a mentor period during our day, which is like a homeroom, and it gives kids an opportunity to participate in some of those groups, some of those clubs, and it gives them a chance to do that face-to-face together. And it ranges from, maybe they're planning a Christmas mitten drive, then they get together and work on their mitten drive. So it's your typical school club type opportunities, but having it during the school day gives kids a defined opportunity to work and meet with each other. Sometimes it's tutoring.
And you guys do no cell phones during that time?
We do, if they're in something like that, we don't say no, but we limit, say if you're engaged in a conversation with someone, we're going to leave the cell phone,
Right.
out of that. And they do. I mean, that's really, I think that for the most part, they do. Now, we also have, we've got 900 kids in the building, so at any given time, half of them are in their homeroom class just, hanging out. And at that point, we don't take phone. We don't.
A percentage
discourage phone use
percentage
from
of students that carry cell phones?
Oh, the vast majority. 90-some percent, probably.
97. I mean, there are a couple that don't. A few come to mind who intend. Like I know they do not. But
okay, now how old are your girls?
They are 7 and 10.
All right, so what thoughts on raising them in this angsty world? You've seen it. You're living it. We talked a little bit before we started recording. The girls don't do a ton of sports, but they're both active in sports. When are you going to give them a cell phone? And are you? Maybe I should start there.
So we have this conversation fairly frequently when come home from a rough day at work that's been precipitated by drama on social media. We talk about how our kids are never going to
listen. I can't even imagine what you guys have to deal with when it comes to what pictures are sent. We
don't even. Well, you can just leave that there.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
It is. Yeah, there are days that you just see things you wish you never saw. So there's been kind of a movement. I don't know if that's the right word I want to use. There's been some research and there's been some stuff that I've read, and I've read both professionally and as a mom. And there's been kind of a push to encourage wait till 8th. So that's waiting until 8th grade for your child to have a mobile device. Our girls have Kindles. My older daughter is an avid reader, and if I bought every book she wanted to read, I would never buy groceries. So she downloads a ton of books from the library. She uses Overdrive, and they do use it they look at PBS videos, and they're young still, so they're not they haven't started getting too much into the social media. They do not have social media accounts, my 7-year-old especially, but even my 10-year-old does not have a social media account. And I am honestly more concerned about limiting that access than I am the mobile device itself.
Yeah.
But 8th grade, I think, is a good start. My sort of philosophy on it is as long as you're not transporting yourself, I know where you are. Like if you're not driving yourself, I've dropped you off, or I've arranged for someone to drop you off or pick you up, or and every parent who's involved in that is also communicating with me through a mobile device. So if you need to get a hold of me, there's a way to do that. I mean, it's easier than it was when we were kids. You had to find a payphone. Like now, it's much easier to find someone that has a phone.
True story. When I was in high school, I did have a pager.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know why.
I'm still too old for that.
I regret it.
But yeah, we, so I think, personally, 8th grade I would not be earlier than 8th grade. I don't, unless something changes, dramatically in our, family situation or something like that, where there's a real need to communicate.
Sure.
I think social media accounts are tricky. Like, in an ideal world, I'd like to, at
20.
6, right. Or even at, at late middle school, when everyone else, it becomes a situation where, do I want to hold firm and therefore marginalize my kid? Like, do I want to hold firm on this and say, you're not having any of this access, and, she's one of 4 kids who's not on social media, for example. So it's a fine line between not angering them and not marginalizing them, and also being reasonable and responsible with it. So, in an ideal world, I'd set up an account that we both look at, that we both, kind of enjoy together. You can, There are some social media platforms. Facebook is one of them, although kids don't use it anymore.
I know, it's so dead.
But there are some, social media platforms that have sort of a kid version where a parent can monitor what's going on, but the kids can have some autonomy with what they do. I've long said that I will always, that as long as I'm paying for that device, I will always have access to that device. Now, there's a really great speaker, and I can get back to you with his name because it's escaping me.
Yeah, I'd love
now.
to put it in the show notes.
But he is, and he's been to our kids' school, and he's spoken at schools around about social media and like things parents need to know. Because, I can say, oh, kid, I'm always going to have access to that device, and I can grab that phone and, put in the code and look at it. But if you're not real careful with how you set up your, privacy settings and all that on the phone, and they can download apps that hide apps. So I can have an app that looks like a calculator, but when you click on that app, it's really, where you're hiding the apps you don't want mom and dad to know you have. So,
you probably just gave like 20 people a heart attack.
So it becomes many, there's many layers, and it's very, it's very multifaceted. It would be so easy to say we're just never going to touch any social media, but the reality of that is not possible. If even, my girls ride the bus home, I have no control over what the girl on the bus has on her phone and what my kid sees as a result of that.
Right.
And the reality is, when we were kids, no one had any control over what the kid on the bus next to me said. I learned a lot more from bus rides and lunchroom conversations than I ever did from conversations with my parents. So that hasn't changed. Kids are still curious, learning, exploring, doing all kinds of things.
Well, back to what Dave said. It's identity stuff.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. They just have access to
So much
whole
more.
lot more information than we ever did.
Dave, I'm going to assume that you're in agreement with what she said.
I am, yeah.
That's a good parenting. I'm just saying.
Right. We should have that conversation first, right?
Yeah, and I was, before Debra started talking about it, I was going to add that, being able to be aware of what they're looking at and talking with them about it, I think is really the key. You're never going to be able to control everything they see. Mm-hmm. You're never going to be able to limit their access, perfectly. They're always going to, at some point they're going to encounter things that are out there, that's just, but creating an environment where we can talk about that, and I know what's going on, and they are comfortable talking with at least one of us about what they're seeing and what's going on with them is crucial. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't changed. That's just good parenting. Talk to your kids. Whether it's social media or not, talk to your kids.
I wish people could have seen your face when you said talk to your kids, because it sounded like that was full of like years of like, my job would be so much easier if you talk to your kids.
Yes, that's so true.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Let me put on your educator hat again. All right, and specifically, Dave, is working in a faith-based school. Someone comes into your office, a student who's having all of the feelings, the angsty, the world, the weight of the world's on my shoulders. I'm having a hard time dealing with it all, and we've all probably been there as adults, and we've probably seen students there. Talk me through what that conversation looks like.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
So the first thing I always ask whenever a kid comes into my office is, so what's up? Which is just such a simple thing, but if you ask a kid, what's up? 9 times out of 10, they tell you. I mean, more than you want to know most times.
They just vomit it out.
Because they want to talk about it. If they've worked up the courage to walk into my office because they're anxious about something, they want to talk about it. They're just looking for the opportunity. And so then my job is just to listen, and to hear what's going on, and to validate what they're saying, let them know they're not crazy, that they are that what they're feeling is what they're feeling, and that's okay. And then I always try to like find out like who they can continue this conversation with. Who are the support people in their life that they can turn to talk about these things? Do they have their parents, friends, a counselor, a teacher they trust, whoever that is, someone that they can, or maybe it's me sometimes, someone that they can continue to turn to and talk about whatever they're feeling when they're going through whatever it is they're going through. And then it really varies a lot from situation to situation. It depends on what they're anxious about and what they're going through. From there, there isn't any single thing or any one thing I do. It depends on what they say. And we kind
is
of
there
work
any
it from
set
there.
like coping skills? Like if you think about the most consistent coping skills that show up when you talk to kids, is there one thing that you tell kids to do?
I tell them to talk to others, to talk to people about it. I tell them to pray about it. I tell them to, those are the two. I tell them to talk and I tell them to pray. I mean, really, that's it.
No,
isn't it? I mean, that's...
It's simple. It's not easy, right?
Correct.
Execution of those two things has eluded many adults and students for generations.
Correct.
I can remember, not necessarily my dad, but my dad's dad never talked about the way he felt at all. It was unheard of. It was stoic manliness was kind of the way to go. So, this isn't new, but it's not necessarily easy.
Right.
Debra, what about you? Do you, when somebody, same situation, student walks in and is feeling all the feelings, how do you approach it?
It's really similar. That is almost always my standard first question. What's up or what's going on? Like, oh, hey, what's going on? What do you need?
Why are you interrupting me?
Sometimes,
no, I'm just kidding. That's what I would say.
And sometimes, and sometimes it's simple. Something we can talk through in 5 or 10 minutes. They're nervous about, I'll get a lot like, I have a test next period and I'm kind of freaking out about it. Okay, tell me why. Did you study for it? No. Well, that might be why you're freaking out about it. So let's focus on how much you know and how much you can draw from your memory, and why don't you take a couple of minutes and read over those notes. Hopefully they took them. So sometimes it's really simple and we just talk through it. If it's one of those more, the weight of the world is on my shoulders, something really
my home life's falling apart.
traumatizing has happened at home, or they've had a significant breakup, which to us as adults can seem, I don't want to use the term petty, but we often downplay kids' relationships with each other. We think, oh, honey, you're going to have a million more relationships between now and, the end of your life. Or you're going to, that's one friendship, or that's one boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. And so we as adults tend to downplay that because we have the benefit of experience. And we have the benefit of knowing, yes, that's going to get better. They don't have that. This is, for some kids, they come in, my boyfriend broke up with me and we went together for 4 months. Well, for us, 4 months, that's a baseball season, not even. So,
right.
But for kids.
That should be a baseball season. Sorry, that's a different podcast.
Right. Well, okay. But, for these kids, for some of them, if you're 14 or 15 years old, that is a long time. And that relationship is really important to them because at that age, they're just figuring out how to do that. They're figuring out how to have a relationship, how to open themselves up to someone. So once you've done that and then that relationship ends, it's crushing. And we have to remember that sometimes as adults, that
and then they have to watch it play out all over social media.
Absolutely, which we never had to do as our generation didn't do, but they do.
I constantly thank God for that, by the way.
Yeah.
Because that would.
I might not do what I do if social media had been around when I were a kid. So
seems like there might be a good follow-up question there somewhere. But I'm gonna let it go.
I think I have to remember to check those emotions when someone comes in and see that. To them, what feels like the weight of the world, to me, might be like, oh, honey, come on, like. I've handled more than that before breakfast, but that it doesn't matter. Like if it's that weighty for them, it's that weighty, like whether I think it is or not. My dog died. Well, we're all going to experience something like that in our lives. But if it's the first time they've experienced loss, which is possible, if their family is intact and their grandparents are young, and or maybe they don't have a close relationship with certain people, who it could truly be the first time they've experienced loss. And we all know we're going to do this 100 times, but they don't. And so to diminish it and say oh, it's just a dog, or oh, it'll get better, or to kind of diminish their feelings, because we know it's, in the grand scheme of life, it's not a big deal. For them it is. So I always try to remember to kind of check my own feelings about things and just really listen to what the root of the issue is. And then from there we talk about I ask them, how are you going to handle this? Like, what are you going to do? And some of them say, I don't know. And legitimately, some of them have issues that I don't know how they're going to handle. So that's when I have to, go to more things in my hat in terms of my expertise, and not just a conversation, but, talking about counseling, talking about, getting other people involved, those kinds of things. And sometimes it's something that we can just talk out. But I ask them a lot, how are you going to handle that? And who do you have to support you? Just like Dave said, for some of them it is family. For some of them, the family's the problem. So who's going to support you outside of that? Do you have a neighbor? Do you have a close friend that when things get really stressed at home, and maybe that's where the problem is at home. Maybe it's it could be a million different things. Parents are going through a divorce, and there's that's stressful to watch them. Maybe even if they're doing it amicably, it can still be stressful to just watch the process of separating. There's a million things that could be going on at home that doesn't necessarily mean major trauma, but just difficult for a kid to deal with. So then I say, do you have a neighbor? Do you have a friend within walking distance that you can just say, hey, I'm going to go for a walk. My kids are high school kids, so they're old enough to, I can't send a 6-year-old off, hey, go walk away. But high school kids, you can, do you have someone you can go to and just say, hey, can I hang out for an hour? I just need a little break from the tensions at home. Or I ask them, is there anybody that you talk to at school? And sometimes that's me. Like, that's my role there. So sometimes it's me, and we'll set up, why don't you just pop in and check, why don't you just check in on Tuesdays? We'll see how everything are going. You pop in my office, we'll touch base. Sometimes it's for 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes it's for 20 or 30 minutes, but they know they have a consistent time and place that they can come in and get some support and some help. So that's where I start. And then again, there's so many different issues and so many different things that come up. But I think, like, the one thing I really would want to say to especially parents who are listening is, like Dave said, talk to your kids. We think we're going to screw it up. Like, we think if I say too much or I talk too much, I'm going to mess it up. Or, I'm going to not say the right things. Kids don't care. Like, and especially if you open the conversation with, like, I ask my girls, how was your day? Well, when our older daughter was, 7 or 8, I'd get like kind of a rundown of the day. She's 10 now. How was your day? Fine. Well, that question doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Like, tell me your favorite thing about today. I always ask them before they go to bed at night, tell me your favorite thing about today, and was there anything that you didn't like about today? Was there anything that disappointed you or hurt you or made you angry? And then it opens the door for them to tell me.
At that point, you're just listening.
Just listening.
You're not doing anything.
Totally just
sending
listening.
emails to anybody about what they're.
We do it I do it when I put them in bed at night. So
Yeah.
when I'm laying next to them at night, kissing them goodnight, I ask them those 2 questions. What was your favorite thing about today? Sometimes it's as they're getting ready for bed, if it's, one of those crazy days and it's
Sure.
late and they need to be in the bed. But I try every day to ask them those 2 questions, because it gives, rather than, it doesn't give them the opportunity to say fine. It gives them the opportunity to actually tell me something that happened. Sometimes it'll be a great fun day. Like, the other day we went to an amusement park. What was your favorite thing about today? Everything. I loved everything about today. Great. Awesome.
Right.
Like,
The other great thing about that is the routine of it. So our girls like expect that, to the point where if we don't ask that question at night, like, they ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Daddy, we didn't talk about your favorite thing today. What was your favorite thing about today? So so it becomes, the routine of it becomes
well, certainly kids can be
something
trained,
they can depend on, and then and then it becomes a skill that they have,
Right.
that they can use to, when I'm anxious, I can think about what was good about today. That's a great technique.
And one point that I thought of just as Dave was talking is that I let them ask me that question, and I answer them age appropriately, as honestly as possible, so that they know, like, I don't always have a perfect day, and things aren't always, sometimes there are things that I love about my day, and sometimes there are things that were really, really hard about my day. And obviously I can't dive into a lot of it with them, but I answer them honestly so that they know that they can answer me honestly too. Was there anything you didn't like about today? No. I say nothing, and then they'll ask me, and I'll be honest with them. And sometimes it's, I didn't really like my lunch today. Like, it really didn't taste very good. But at least I've given them an answer. And so they, almost always answer the question.
Yeah.
Like, with more than just nothing or everything, or, they've gotten into that routine where they will tell me most times what happened that was good or bad.
I think another key too is not feeling like that I need to be responsible for fixing the anxiety that my own kids bring to me, or that my students bring to me. I know when I was younger, like earlier in my career, it was something I kind of struggled with a lot. Like, kids would come to me and I felt like, oh my gosh, they're bringing me this great big problem. I need to somehow fix that. I need to help them with that. That's what they're expecting me to do. And I have learned to let go of that arrogance, I think, is what that really is.
Oh.
And to that I could somehow do that. I'm not going to be the one that's going to fix whatever problem it is that they have. I can't do that. God can do that. Maybe they can do that. Maybe there are people that are in their lives that are going to maybe help them with that. I need to be able to let them talk about it so that they can figure that out.
So would that be if a parent was sitting in front of you, or if you could give a message to parents? One thing I'm hearing loud and clear is talk to your kids. The other one, is it let them figure it out? Is it let them deal with it? Or is there another message you think
it's let them deal with it, but don't take that the wrong way. That doesn't mean, let them figure it out. It'll be fine. That's not a hands-off approach. It's allow them to work through it, but walk with them through that process. To guide them,
engage with them in problem solving.
Right, exactly. But to allow them to work through it, so that they know that they can. That calms your anxiety to know that I've got this. I can figure this out. And if I can't, then I know someone's got my back.
Someone's walking alongside you. Right. Yeah. I think that's huge, and I think too many of our parents sometimes today, and I've been guilty of this myself, have gone in to rescue my kids from problems that they should have just figured out on their own.
Right.
And sometimes I do that in the arrogance of my own life, or for what I perceive as the sake of time, because watching my 7-year-old daughter try to figure out her car seat might be the most maddening thing. I really wish I was a better person, but I'm not, and so sometimes I'm like, and just shove her in the car and let's go.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I've definitely been there myself.
I would say that, and I like to ask a lot of questions, just like Dave was saying. Like, rather than provide an answer, ask the question. So how are you going to solve that problem? Or what are some ways you can solve that problem? Let's look at 2 or 3 options. Like, so, kids come in, and I'll use a simple example. Like, kids come in, and I've just completely bombed a test. It was terrible. My grade is in the toilet, and I'm never going to go to college. And this is how they manifest all this out, right?
It's the fantasy.
So one bad grade in geometry means I'm not going to college. Well, again, we all know that's not reality, but they are, in this moment, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. So that's when I'll ask them questions. Well, how are you going to solve this problem? I don't know. Is there a retake policy in your class? No. Okay. So you can't retake that. You can't do anything about that grade. So how do we move forward from here? Well, I'm never going to go to college. Okay. But how are we going to move forward from here? And I don't even address that piece of it at that moment because it doesn't matter. I can tell them, oh, honey, yes, you are going to go to college and there's a place for everybody, which is true. But they're not ready to hear that. They want, me to feel bad with them. And I don't want to feel bad with them. I want to walk them through that emotion and move them forward. So, okay, how are you going to solve this problem? What are you going to do next time that might produce a different outcome? And you have to handle that. You have to talk to your teacher. Maybe you need to correct that test because you need to know those skills for the next chapter. And we'll walk through what, I'll have the kid come up with 2 or 3 different options. What am I going to do? Which one do you like best? What do you think? How can you see yourself getting through that? And that, I think, would be my piece of advice in terms of, the parents I deal with is let your child handle that small problem, because how they handle that small thing, we just talked about this last night, how they handle that small thing is how they're going to handle that big thing. So they may never experience any real major loss or trauma or, dramatic situation their entire high school career. But if you've let them manage the little things, then when they're in college and something really does happen, and, I hate that something is going to happen, but it will, eventually in our lives, we're going to deal with loss or trauma or illness or something is going to happen. So if we've let them all along the way build those skills and make those decisions and feel confident in their ability to do that, then when they're faced with that big thing, they're going to handle it the same way they handled that little thing. So I'm guilty of the same thing. My kid forgets their lunch money and they only get to buy lunch once a week and they've forgotten their lunch money. I really want to just say, I want to call. Dave's closer to him than I am. At school, I want to call and say, hey, can you just drop this off for them? Or they forgot their gym clothes or whatever the case may be, but no, is anything going to happen differently if I don't take them their lunch money, or I don't take them the homework they forgot to do, or I don't drop off that envelope that they were supposed to bring in? Unless that envelope they were supposed to bring in is something super important and my responsibility, they'll turn it in the next day. And if they don't get, if they forgot their homework and they don't get points for it, she is in 4th grade. That's okay. The world isn't going to end over that.
And it doesn't matter what grade she's in.
Right.
If she's a junior in high school and it's an important chemistry assignment, it's still not the end of the world.
Right.
It's all going to be
and for them to know that and to know. And if it happens once or twice, there's been a couple of times she's come home at the end of the school day and said, I left my folder on the counter. Oh, yeah? I see it. You sure did. And then, she does the typical kid thing, which I also did as a kid. You didn't put it in my backpack. Honey, it's not my backpack. I pack my own work bag. I pack my own lunch. You got your responsibilities. Okay. And even in my students, I'll get lots of emails, lots of phone calls. We're beginning a new school year right now. So the thing that I'm dealing with the most is schedules. And I get lots of emails and lots of phone calls from parents about making schedule changes. And that would be one opportunity where I would say to a parent, your kid has an email address at school, email me. I want to have this conversation with your child. I want to walk through, what elective does your child want to take? If you want to be a part of that as a parent, great. Come in together. I'm totally down with that. But I want your child to be the one to communicate those kinds of things with me. There are times as a parent it is appropriate that you call me and say, hey, just wanted you to know Johnny's grandma's not doing well and he's really having a hard time and I want you to know the background so that you can check in on him. Absolutely. That's how you stay involved with that. But, I think as parents, and sometimes, like you said, it's for the sake of time or efficiency or whatever. It's not that we, are always trying to protect our kids from having to do stuff, but it's just way easier if I make a list and do it, right? But we need them to learn how to make that list and do it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going a little off script here. You guys have mentioned 900 students in your building, Deborah.
Correct.
How many students?
About 600.
About 600.
Yeah.
So you've got about 902 students to take care of, and you've got about 602 students to take care of. How do you take care of yourself? I mean, you deal with a lot of stress. You're in really pressure-packed positions that, I mean, you're obviously not in it for the money, right?
Right. Depends on who you ask.
And so, that's so you also have to deal with school levies in the public sector. But as functional, healthy adults, how do you deal with your own stress and anxiety?
I try to follow my own advice and to talk to people about what's bothering me and to pray about what's going on.
Is that easy for you? Because I feel like
not at all. It sounds easy though, doesn't it? You know,
I was like really hoping for some magic bullet or something. We just solved the world's problems on the Reclamation podcast.
Yeah, right. But I think it is that easy to say. I think we want to create, or at least I do sometimes, like you want to create some process or some big complicated thing. Well, if I just do these 6 steps, then I'll be, then I'll always be able to manage my stress and always be healthy. And I don't know. Those, for me.
Do you have a routine for talking people in prayer? Can you share either, it get really granular here?
Right. So for prayer, I try to pray each evening when I go to bed. I just take a few minutes for prayer, and usually that's just keep quiet and informal kind of prayer for me. I've been I've started running just recently in the past few weeks. I've been back and forth with that off and on throughout my pretty much entire life.
I have a love-hate relationship with running
yes,
as well.
I do too. But when I do it, it's not only good exercise, it's also good spiritual time. It's time for me to think and to pray and reflect on what's going on in my life too. So it has a double benefit. And so when I'm good about doing that, that's a healthy thing that I think I do too. Yeah.
Debra?
Mm-hmm. So Dave and I are pretty different in this way. Dave is much more introverted than I am. I am, of all things, personality-wise, I am the strongest extrovert. So I'm kind of the opposite. I definitely, where it is hard for him to talk to people, it is not hard for me to talk to people. And sometimes that's the problem. Sometimes that's anxiety producing, in that I feel like I am going to solve everyone else's problems. I'm going to solve my problems. I'm going to solve the world's problems by, just talking to people long enough and convincing them that we can solve these problems,
right.
And that can actually be anxiety producing, and I need to just chill out. But I would say probably for me, definitely talking to people. I mean, I am definitely a people person. I do not have, he needs that quiet time to pray and be introspective. I thrive on being with somebody else.
Right.
If that's, sometimes it's the girls, sometimes it's Dave, sometimes it's friends, whatever. But I definitely, I always tell the girls it's how I draw my energy. And I draw my energy from other people. So, if I was left alone for 2 days, that would be anxiety.
No, solitary confinement is my definition of hell. Just so we're all clear.
That is not. I get lost in my own thoughts, and I go down, the rabbit hole of what if this happens and that happens, and so I'm better when I'm engaged. That's also exhausting. So I am pretty. We both are really, especially with the girls, but I am a pretty firm believer in a really good night of sleep. And I work very hard at making sure I am my preference is an 8-hour night of sleep. It becomes.
When's the last time you had that?
2 nights ago.
Oh, wow. That's strong.
But almost always during the school year, it's between 7 and 8.
Do you do 7 and 8 too?
Yes.
Do you guys go to bed at the same time?
Most
Usually,
of the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys pray together before you go to bed?
No.
No, we don't usually pray together.
I was just curious. Just kind of seeing how that works.
Yeah.
Strongly
Maybe
recommend
at
it.
the same time, perhaps it's happening, we're both laying in bed or whatever, and I don't know what he's thinking and he doesn't know what I'm thinking, but
Sure.
so
Side note,
possibly
nothing has changed
simultaneously,
my
but-
marriage more than praying over my wife every night. Just free tip. Free tip. I'm stronger. I make all the couples I'm doing premarital counseling for pray for each other in the premarital process. Mostly because they're already living together. But that's a whole different podcast. Okay, this has been so good, so good. Last question I always like to ask all my guests is if you could go back 20 years ago, starting off in education, young Dave, young Debra, maybe you guys, I think you guys were in the Lalonde house at that point in time. They're just getting started. It's about the time we met.
Right.
What's the one piece of advice that you would give yourself if you could go back and talk to young Debra?
Ooh, I would say two things, and one of them I'm piggybacking off of what Dave said earlier, is number one, you're not going to solve everyone's problems, and you're not, like, I think a lot of us who go into education feel like we're going to go into education and we're going to be everything to everyone. Like, I am going to be that person that my students idolize and love and are just going to feel comfortable with. And, 8 weeks into it, you've got kids calling you names in class. And like, okay, well, I'm not that person. Like, they're not idolizing me like I thought they would.
What is wrong with them?
So I think that would be number one, is you're not going to solve everyone's problems, and you have to be realistic with who you are and what you're capable of.
Yeah.
Like if I give everything to my job and my students, I have nothing left to give to myself and my family and my friends, and that's not fair to them, and it's not fair to me. So balance. I would talk a lot about. I would talk a lot about.
You guys can't see it, but Dave is definitely laughing at Debra right now.
I'm laughing because you're stealing mine.
I would talk a lot of. I would tell myself a lot about balance, and also something I learned a long time ago, and it's basically to go slow, to go fast. And I know that sounds weird, but
no, it's a military thing.
But
to
take your time to make things happen. Like I've spent enough time in education to know that if there is one constant in education, it is change. Right. So, I mean, I have 4 classes of students in my building, and 3 of them have different graduation requirements. Like, there's one constant, it's change. So take your time, be thoughtful and thorough as you're moving forward with your career. I think that's what I would say.
Dave?
So.
Yeah, she pretty much stole mine.
No, at least you guys are aligned.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Like I said earlier, the thing about realizing that I'm not going to save people, that I'm there to help and to sort of get out of the way and let God do the work, is something that I've really learned a lot over the course of my career. So that for sure. And then I think just to be patient. The 22-year-old me was very idealistic and very thought that everything was just all going to work out. That I was very optimistic about just everything in all of life. Everything was just going to come together, and then it hasn't in the past 20 years, and I've been frustrated at many points along the way because life just isn't coming together. I thought that the world would be saved by now. What's the holdup on that?
Right.
So to be patient, and I guess it's part of the same thing. To be patient and to let go of my need for control or my need for affirmation or whatever my needs are, and to let things be. Yeah.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. You're preaching to me for sure, and I love every minute of it. So thank you both so much for taking the time and for investing in the next generation and for what you do as educators. I typically offer ways if people want to follow you, but you guys both really aren't on social media in that capacity, right?
No, not really.
Yeah. So any resources that you guys follow that you think people should follow? This is your free opportunity to plug anybody, anything you want.
There's nothing in particular, but I would just recommend whatever it is that's going to help you to grow spiritually or intellectually. Read something that's inspiring every day. Mm-hmm. That's different for every person, but but that everyone needs that daily dose
Yeah.
of inspiration. So maybe that's as simple as reading the scripture every day.
Do you do a mail-in devotional? Do you get any email devotionals?
We do at school. We get a daily Bible verse every morning.
Yeah.
So it could be something as simple as that. Yeah. And there's a million.
million.
I couldn't even
Right.
recommend one. There's a million different
Yeah.
things out there.
Absolutely. we I'm a big fan of the YouVersion Bible app, and they do a Bible. They do a verse of the day and a lot of devotionals on there.
Yeah.
Deborah, any accounts you think somebody should follow?
So no, I don't, because I don't really follow anybody, and I don't want to jump out there and put something out there.
Right. You guys
and
have
follow it and be like, oh my.
You guys
gosh,
have a
it's
digital
crazy.
footprint it's a very small digital footprint, which
Yeah.
is okay.
So I don't. But I would echo what Dave said about read or find something that you're passionate about. Maybe it has something to do with your job. Maybe it has something to do with your kids. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, I'm a pretty avid reader in general, and I think that helps me grow. That makes me a smarter person. It makes me a more empathetic person, and I try to read a variety of things. Like, if you read a memoir and you read about, things that are happening to people, you become more empathetic. If you read, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you become smarter. So,
Right.
So pick something they're interested in. It doesn't even really matter. Just,
Sure.
and I also, I would temper that with one of the reasons I don't follow a lot on social media. One of the reasons I don't get a lot of my information from social media is that it can be very daunting. You can follow, somebody, like there's one food blogger I used to follow because I'm interested in food. It's just a side thing.
Yeah.
But I think
No, I like food. Yeah,
but it
food's
becomes
good.
very like I almost felt very overwhelmed by like her perfect plates and her perfect portions and her perfect calorie counts, and finally I was like, put an Oreo on the plate, like so I feel like sometimes you follow somebody and you can become too absorbed in it and feel like they
identity,
are too
right?
idealistic.
It's exactly what we've been talking about the whole time.
So just pick
Identity.
something that's good and go with it. And if you don't like it, choose something else. Like, don't power through something you don't like.
That's good. Again, thank you guys so much. Such a rich conversation. Strange random comment. Do you guys know the Enneagram?
Yes.
What numbers? Do you know? What number you are?
I haven't taken it forever. But a 5 when I took it 20 some years ago.
It makes a lot of sense.
The thinker,
I've never
the
taken
deep
it.
thinker.
You've never taken it. Interesting.
Yeah.
My guess is you'd be an 8. I'm an 8, and it resonates with that kind of need to challenge everything.
Yeah.
And not in a bad way, just this is who we are, right?
Right.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the time today. And I want to encourage everyone to continue to subscribe. Lots more conversations around this topic, lots of different viewpoints. And again, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this conversation. I hope you found it as life-giving as I did. One of the ways that you can be sure never to miss an episode is to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. I myself love to use Overcast. I found that it's just a great way to manage all of my podcasts. There are about 10 I listen to on a pretty regular basis, and I don't miss an episode because I always subscribe. The other thing that you can do is tell somebody about the podcast. We're always trying to get the word out. Maybe there's somebody who's dealt with anxiety, or other parents or friends group that just need to hear this conversation. Dave and Deborah dropped some incredible wisdom that needs to be shared. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today. Thank you for all you do to support this opportunity that I have to do podcasts, and I just appreciate all of you. Our next conversation will be with Grace Kilroy. Grace is a former student, alumni now, I guess, is at Centerville High School. She was in our Fellowship of Christian Athletes group, and she talks about, from a student's perspective, what sports and anxiety and all of it means. It's a very vulnerable and honest conversation with a pretty neat young lady. So look for that next week. And again, the best way to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you real soon.